Welcome back to the channel. Today I am doing a review of the Bestech WIbra or Vibra. This is a knife that I was very excited about. Let's unbox it here. We've got your typical Bestech pouch here. Inside you've got your standard goodies, I imagine. Stickers, warranty, microfiber, and our knife. This knife is a titanium frame lock in M390 steel. So this knife, as I tested it, I discovered it has amazing good looks. It has great fit and function, or great fit and finish rather, but it actually has somewhat poor function. So let's get into the details on this knife. This is a, like I said, M390 blade, coating, nice blue anodized titanium handle, machined titanium pocket clip, really cool turbine style pivot bolt on there. So I love the way this knife looked. I love the fact that it has that kind of aggressive Wharncliffe style blade. That's a very functional blade shape that I appreciate a lot. I love the look of the cutouts and the machining in the titanium. Absolutely beautiful knife. If you kind of look at the fit and finish, this is a very solid knife. Even when I hold the lock out this way, you know, the blade swings freely. There's absolutely no side-to-side blade play. Great centering on the blade there. If you look down into the knife itself, you know, lock, the frame lock, there's a little bit of play, but it's not like an alarming amount of play. If you compress it, you can see it moves a little, but not too much. So overall, nice solid fit and finish. Where we start to get into the problems with this knife is the functionality of the knife. So there's no problems with edge retention, right? The M390 steel does what it's supposed to do. Solid 225 cuts through my dowels before it started tearing any paper on the edge retention. However, when we start to get into how the details of how you interact with this knife when you use it, that's when we start to get into issues. Pocket clip is machined titanium, not real adjustable, and it's very thin, so it's very soft. It does not hold on to your pocket very well. Add to that the fact it is very sharp on the end here. I'll turn it sideways. I don't know how well it'll turn up on the video, but that is pointy and sharp enough to stab through your pants if you're not careful. It's also kind of hard on the hand, which unfortunately is kind of the story of this knife. If you look along the edges here, you got little points here. All of these edges are sharp. They're not really rounded off. The back point up here on the back of the knife, the spine of the knife is sharp. This knife is very uncomfortable to hold. As I was doing my cutting test, it was poking into my hand everywhere. It just is not comfortable. Had my wife try it in her hands, slightly smaller hand size. She also agreed this is very uncomfortable. Add to that, it's also pretty narrow. I tend to like a long, narrow handle, but this is pushing it, especially with the sharp edges. Because it's narrower, you kind of have to grip it harder, which makes those sharp edges poke into your hand all the more. So, you know, overall, just not great ergonomics on this knife. The flipper action is really nice. That flipper sticks out good. There's a good pocket there to reach it with your finger. But when you flip it, there's a notch right there on the back of the handle where they have recessed the flipper channel, but they didn't do it quite far enough, so your fingernail catches that notch and it hurts. It's uncomfortable. Want to rip off your fingernail. So they kind of really screwed up the ergonomics of this poor knife, which is very disappointing because I really wanted to like this knife. I intended this to be one of my main carry knives, but it's definitely not going to be. Let's get into some specs on this knife here. We'll do some specs in disassembly. Get the scale on. So this is coming in right at 3.1 ounces on my scales. pretty lightweight, which is to be expected for a knife that's this thin. Size comparison, here's your classic Benchmade Griptilian, so you can see it's narrower, about the same length. So it's a nice long blade, good handle length. It's very narrow this way in depth though. Here is a Benchmade Bug Out. So small knife, you can see smaller handle. Width is wider, right, than the Bug Out, but narrower this way. Closer competitors, something that's actually more similar to this knife, would be a Kaiser Splinter in titanium. This also has kind of a narrow handle shape, Wharncliffe blade shape, but this one doesn't have any sharp pokey edges that dig into your hand. So this is actually much more pleasant to hold. Cold steel, 4-inch tie light, right, which is longer, similar depth, but much smoother. Tie light has a wider handle, top to bottom. And then something that's also a pretty direct competitor, which is a Kaiser Clutch. There's that, I'll flip them this way. These guys are probably the most direct competitors. Again, this one's more comfortable. I would much rather have this knife than this knife, plus this is about $100 cheaper. This knife is, when I bought it in the $255 range, very, very expensive for what it is here. Let's do some disassembly. I'll get into the pivot here. Beautiful turbine style pivot on here. I believe this is a T8, yes. T8 pivot, T6 hardware, fairly standard. I really, really love the beautiful turbine machined hardware on this. I just wish the knife worked better. There's pivot. Oh, these are both T8. So T8 structural bolts and pocket clip bolt as well on this knife. So that's pretty cool. I like it when they make the hardware all the larger size. That tends to reduce the likelihood of stripping out. Okay. There's the back bolt. I'll put them in the magnetic tray there. So there's only 2 structural bolts on the side of this knife. Let's see if it will come apart. There it goes. And there's an extra pin here on the back. So this this back spacer has a pin that slides in and out of it, but it's not a bolt, it's just a pin. So that's different, kind of cool. Not necessarily any kind of an issue there. Washer set into the titanium on the handle. You can see some good skeletonizing on the titanium handle, which makes this a relatively lightweight knife. What they've done here is left the blade full thickness in where the bearings go, which I like because that makes it a stronger blade. So not a huge tang, but they've left the full thickness there. They've put the stop pin inside the blade, which that's actually a pretty strong way to do a stop pin, especially since they've left it fairly large. Again, that's kind of a hooded area in there, which tends to collect some dirt. Not my favorite way to do that. Have had problems with those jamming up with dirt before, but it's very, it's very durable. There's no durability issues with that there. Ceramic bearings, again, not my favorite way to do knife bearings, but they're not going to rust or anything. I think ceramic bearings are a unnecessary failure point. They're more brittle, and you're not going to ever notice the difference in smoothness with only rotating 180 degrees. Really, the extra roundness and smoothness of ceramic bearings doesn't become an issue until you've got something that's spinning way faster than an opening knife blade is going to spin. So there's the bearings. Let me take off the pocket clip quickly here so we can see how it's attached. It's a single bolt on the pocket clip, which likely means some sort of pocket machined interface on the underside. Yeah, and this one's machined very well. It sits in there really tightly, not any wiggle on the pocket clip. So the 1 bolt, design isn't necessarily a problem. Just don't strip that 1 bolt, right? So there is your WIbra disassembly engineering. My overall conclusions on this knife: Bestech, the Bestech knives that I've reviewed somewhat recently kind of have a tradition going of excellent fit and finish and bizarre ergonomics, and this is falling right in line with that theme. This is not a knife I would recommend. It's just, a knife is basically a sharp blade and a comfortable handle, right? This is a sharp blade and a sharp handle, which is not good. So I don't necessarily recommend this knife. I wish it were a great knife because I love the Wharncliffe blade. I love the long, slender, format. Love the good blade length, but it's uncomfortable. And that is not a functional knife. So there's my review. Hope you enjoyed. Like, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff, and enjoy all of your adventures.